Good morning, subscribers. Welcome to episode 5 of Complex Humans. It's 10:13 a.m. here in Sydney and it's Saturday. And our guest for today is Mr. Peter Twigg and he's in Canberra right now. How are you, Peter?
I'm well, thanks, Oliver. Good to be talking with you.
Awesome. What would you like to talk about today?
Well, all my life I've been very passionate about futurism and the study of the future, and so I'd love to be able to talk with you about that. It's a topic I've been studying for probably 30 odd years plus, and yeah, just you see things happening in the world, and you kind of, as you build a context over a long period of time, it becomes this fascinating study of what's going to happen next. And at this time in the history of the world, I can't believe how amazing things are at the moment in terms of the political economic divide, the technology movement, all sorts of things are happening. And where's it all going to take us? And yeah, and so here I am, so talking with you. So
Awesome. These are the topics I love. And 30 years, like not many people can sustain a practice for 30 years, right? It's an amazing thing that you were able to sustain it for so long. My question is, is futurism like trend spotting or is it predicting specific events? What's the difference between those two?
well, I guess there's two types of futurism. There's first of all, futurism is the study of postulating possible, probable, and preferable futures and worldviews and the myths that kind of underlay them. That's the Wikipedia definition. And so you get, there's two kinds of futures. There's futures that work with companies and governments, and they try to extract some sort of view of the world moving forward for their clients. And to be honest, I don't have a lot of respect for that. It's because it's kind of like liberating the knowledge that's contained already within an organization. And it's also kind of like joining the dots, so it's a bit linear in its approach. The world doesn't seem to work like that to me, and the world has lots of different things running through it, and at a very gross level, of course, where you see the events on television, right down to the subtle events that sort of are happening behind the scenes. And I'm not talking about human manufactured events. I'm talking about the psychology and of humans, lots of humans operating together, and that's sort of that's where my interest lies. And so from there, it's possible to actually make predictions once you start to understand the rhythm and flow of human nature. So that's what I'm all about. And so yes, the answer is you can make very clear predictions based on sort of what you perceive at this deeper sort of subterranean level. And one of the keys to all of this is that when you can really get it into your head and heart that sort of social mood drives social events. So if we see events in the in the media, watching television, for example, we can say, well, these will create a social mood, and people are going to be depressed, or the economy is going to collapse, or the economy is going to be in depression, or whatever. This is not true. The social mood, it's actually the other way around. Social mood actually creates social events. And so when you see terrorist attacks happening, when you see peace treaties being signed between nations, you can see that this all takes place within the context of a particular social mood. There's more peace treaties signed at the time of peak economic activity, when the social mood is brilliant, compared to, say, a situation where people are depressed, when peace treaties are likely to break apart and terrorist attacks are likely to happen. So when you really can imbibe this and live this, then you can actually see what's actually going on.
Hmm. So I'm just suddenly remembering my undergrad economics. Is it like what John Maynard Keynes called the animal spirits that move the economy?
Very much so. Yes, because confidence is a large part of that, and of course, the one person who's optimistic about a situation won't have much of an effect. But when a whole society is optimistic, it does create these bullish mood swings and bearish mood swings, and that we're tapping into that when we're starting to talk about that. I think, to be honest, this social mood phenomenon actually goes a lot deeper. There's a guy by the name of Robert Prechter who, starting in the 70s, started to research all of this, and it has some very real repercussions. He's developed this field called socionomics, and I'm a great exponent of that. And socionomics, SOCIONOMICS. And so there's that level of understanding that you can have, but also when you see a little bit deeper, you can see that there are these cycles of human endeavor that happen right through history, and that you can actually plot these cycles. And quantitative wave theory, which is a 55-year business cycle, for example, is a classic situation that's been written about. Kondratiev was a Russian economist in the 1920s, and he was able to pick up, analyze this 55-year business cycle. The US stock market has an 8-year business cycle, an 8-year cycle, for example, and this March, as we're speaking, is the potential peak of this 8-year cycle, to be followed by a potential low point in 8 years' time. It doesn't matter that the low point can actually occur at a higher point than the current point where the stock market is. It could also be a much lower point as well too. And but the fact is that between now and in 8 years' time, we're in for some pretty choppy time where we can definitely see new highs in the US stock market, for example, but we can also see massive new lows. In fact, we could even see the previous cycle low in 2009, when the Dow Jones was, for example, below around 6,400, I think it was. We can actually see that low being taken out by this 8-year cycle. So, if I can just extend on that, that sort of that sense of this social mood driving social events. Is, well, what sort of events can happen in the world that would cause that to happen? And then when you kind of get back to the surface of looking at what's happening in the, through the media and world events, you see, well, political will in most liberal democratic countries is failing at the moment. Definitely here in Australia, definitely in the United States. Britain is a bit more optimistic at the moment because they've had their Brexit event, but whether that lasts or not remains to be seen. There are all these political forces at play, and when political will fails, sooner or later, economic will starts to fail. And if you want to look back in economic history to a time when we had this similar sort of event happening where political will was failing, followed by economic will, we just have to look to the 1970 to 1974 phase, when political will failed in the United States and here in Australia. It was the ending of the Vietnam War. There was a change of government, which was considered to be quite threatening. In Australia, that's when Dr. Whitlam came to power and with the Labor Party, and along with that came a whole series of political events and followed by economic events. In the US, we had the Nixon Watergate affair and also a failing stock market as that went into the lows of 1974 and 1975. So very interesting to see a repetition of that here in 2017, and I think though that this time because of the cycles we're operating in and the level of intensity of social mood, it's going to be a lot worse than it was back in 1972, 1975.
But right now, am I correct in my in what I've heard that Trump is in power, yet share prices in the US are going on an all-time high, right? Instead of
That's right. They call that the
coming
Trump
down as what
rally.
you might think, right?
So say that again.
Most people would expect that because you put an unpredictable man in the seat of government in the US, that the share price would go down, but actually they went up. And what's your take on that?
Well, I think the scene has been set long before Trump came to power. We'd probably be having this so-called Trump rally, whether it was Trump in power or Hillary Clinton. And it simply because of the events that have preceded the actual US presidential election. And so we're in the end phases of a 230-year business cycle, which started back in 1783. And from my viewpoint, this huge cycle, we've been in the up phase ever since then. We can call that the Industrial Revolution, basically. And we're in the final end of that phase where we could be going into, as this cycle tops. This is happening despite the fact of personalities and the rhetoric and politics of left versus right and all that sort of nonsense. If you're dealing with in futurist from a futurist viewpoint at that level, then you're already lost. You're never going to get it. This is much deeper than that. It's really, we're dealing with this the psyche of millions and millions of human beings, and how that plays out in events like the stock market, in the media, in the press, in social events, and what have you. So, yeah,
that's very much in line with the theme of this series, Complex Humans. It's
cool. Yeah,
complexity.
okay.
Yeah, you have like all these autonomous agents, and then they react with each other, and then based on the reactions, we have these things that emerge. So it's interesting that you kind of have to watch the emergence, right? It's not like you're predicting based on a formula or a linear approach, right? It's more complex, right?
It is much more complex, but there are lots of tools in economics and political theory, for example, that you can apply. Game theory is one situation where you can be watching the news and you can see, well, this is playing out, and you can see that this will be the outcome based on game theory. Another one is the law of contrary opinion, and the Brexit vote in June last year was a classic example of that. Everyone was saying that the Remainers would win and Britain would stay in the EU, and that was that. And yet, how did they get that so wrong? Whenever you see mass opinion weighted one way, the probability is actually more in the favour of it being an opposite. And if you're a gambling person, you can actually make a lot of money just by being able to work on that law of contrary opinion and be able to, focus on that. And probably 8 out of 10 times you're going to be right. And Brexit is a classic example. The US presidential election was exactly the same. I want to talk about the Australian election. Sorry, say again.
For the US election, I had the feeling that, because I've been watching social media, not mainstream media, and yes, I had the feeling that Trump would win. And I was gonna put a bet on it, but I didn't. I should have. I could have. I was in the Netherlands, but I was watching social media, and mainstream media and all the experts were all Hillary, but I was watching the people. There's a lot of people following him and following his Twitter feeds.
Yeah.
He couldn't turn, and I thought, I have a feeling he's gonna win. Right?
Yeah, yeah. In the Australian federal government election that was held in July last year, it was very clear that the results was the cumulative wisdom of the Australian people created as close as they could actually get to a hung parliament. So this is the spontaneous ordering that the famous economist Frederick Hayek, who's one of my heroes, really spoke about. And this spontaneous ordering of the electorate occurred by putting the government in a situation where it can do the least possible damage because of the way the House of Representatives and the Senate are organised at the moment. If some radical piece of legislation comes in, then it's going to be knocked on the head. And basically, the government just has enough power to be able to deal with the the day-to-day business and the minor issues. And unfortunately, the benefit of that is that it protects the Australian people against their political masters. And this is a very clear message from the Australian people to politicians. We don't trust you. We don't respect you. We're going to put you in a situation where you can do the least possible amount of damage. And this is exactly what happens. The long-term consequence of that, though, is that we're seeing a collapse of political will because the government has a lot of trouble getting its agenda through through Parliament, and so ultimately this will lead to a collapse of the economy here in Australia. When you back that up with the longer term cyclic analysis of where liberal democratic economies stand, this kind of doesn't bode well for where Australia stands at the moment.
Awesome. Like to the viewers, you would have noticed that we've gone over the usual time, but it feels like the topics Peter and I are discussing requires more getting deeper into. So I'm just gonna let it run its course. So we're gonna continue. Is that okay, Peter?
Yeah, sure. Yep.
Yeah, because I think these are some of these kind of topics. You can't just do it in sound bites, and I think that's a major issue in news reporting nowadays, that the journalists are not capturing the real essence of the issues because they want like clickbaits, they want like one-liners, but you can't one-line a complex system, right?
Exactly. I also think that because media is being captured by sort of the interests of Rupert Murdoch and other media barons, it kind of there's that aspect, and also because of journalists' own political agenda, they've lost the fairness doctrine, and until that's reintroduced into journalism, we're not going to see any sort of meaningful change in the way media content is delivered, unfortunately. And this just serves to polarize society, basically, because you get the people who agree and of course the people who disagree, and this has huge repercussions for the next 4 years for the Trump presidency. Not so much in a country like Australia, but because we're more interested in our sport than we are in politics, to be quite honest. And as long as the economy is somehow limping along, then everything should be right made is the attitude. In the US, however, that's a totally different situation, and the more we see the left wing trying to agitate and spoil the Republican and Trump-led government, the more we're going to see this increasing polarization. And the silent majority that put Trump into power will reach a point where they've had enough and they will react. And the consequences in America are actually going to be pretty horrific if this continues to escalate as it is at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, so going back to the journalism angle, yeah, you could say that we've lost objectivity or fairness. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it, which I prefer, is that really there wasn't really objectivism to start with, because we're actually seeing the truth that whoever writes something has a point of view, right? Like with complexity, if you're part of the system, you can't take away your biases. So in a way, the internet is just revealing what is real, because in the past there were monopolies, right? All these newspapers, there was like one major newspaper each city, and they were a monopoly, so that in a way they could say this is the truth because there's no one else saying it. But before that industrialization of newspapers, during the time of Ben Franklin, he was like, each newspaper had their own agenda, right? And it was like fierce fighting among these small newspapers. And Ben Franklin had his own newspaper. So I think we're going back to that, where we're seeing that, yeah, everything's biased, and I think that's a key. That's my beef with the left, is they think that they're right, that you're stupid if you don't agree with them. But the point of a democratic society is to disagree and still work with disagreeing. But it seems like if I don't agree with what the left is saying, then I'm racist, or they label you as racist or misogynist, even though you're just trying to have a discussion. You can't even discuss, because to them, how can you not see that this is the truth? They seem to think that they have a monopoly on truth. What's your take on that?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I totally agree with you, and I find, again, if we take a step back, we've seen this liberal democratic process spreading through the Western world over the last 400 years, starting in Britain. And unfortunately, this whole liberal democratic tradition is now dying. It has been for about 40 years now, just over 40 years. And within the next 20 to 30 years, the way it's going, it will die. And part of that is the closing down of freedom of speech, and basically the movement from a liberal democratic way of life to a totalitarian way of political life. And I find that very disturbing, very upsetting. And of course, the pathway this is happening is through the progressive agenda, where a group of people believe that they know better than you or I or your listeners what is better for all of us, and they make the decisions on our behalf. And unfortunately, we bear the consequence of that. And that is the totalitarian state that's emerging.
Yeah, and like the old saying, like old sayings have real wisdom in them. We should always listen. Like hell, is it the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So these things are happening because they're saying it's for the good, like we're doing this to protect the minorities, or to protect, but censoring people to protect minorities is a road to totalitarianism. Like, going back to Hayek, he's also one of my heroes, and I read his book, The Road to Serfdom, and it's just
Cool.
it just shows you how they can use fear and will take care of you, and
Yeah.
and then instead of relying on having faith in people's individual knowledge. I think one of the key things that I love about Hayek is how he looks at dispersion of knowledge. Like, no one person can know, and a very key narrative that stuck to my mind is it's not Hayek per se, but it's related to what he says. It's, the pencil story. Like,
The what, sorry?
The pencil story.
Oh yes, iPencil. Yeah.
That's iPencil. Yeah. No one plans. Oh, we're gonna mine rubber in Malaysia. We're gonna cut timber in this amount of timber in Canada. We're gonna mine graphite in Africa to make 1 million pencils. No one does that. It's just because of the price system, the signaling that happens, and then magically it all works. Like, and we've seen how when during the time of the USSR, they tried to plan the economy, it failed miserably because no one person or no one party or committee can be smart enough to know the economy because the knowledge is dispersed. So I really find that fascinating, and even reading Hayek's Nobel Prize acceptance speech, it's an amazing read.
It is
Could you
indeed,
share?
yeah.
Can you share some more insights that you've valued from studying Hayek? And I'll try to while you're doing that, I'll try to bring up Hayek's speech so that other people could see it.
Right. Okay. Well, just the man was first of all, he was an Austrian economist, Austrian School of Economics economist, and he trained under Ludwig von Mises, who's considered one of the high points of the Austrian School of Economics movement. And in the 1930s, he emigrated from Austria. The people involved with the Austrian School of Economics could see what was happening in Austria and also Germany with the Nazification of Germany. And so they moved. Ludwig von Mises moved to the United States, and Friedrich Hayek moved to London, where he took up a post with the London School of Economics. And he was basically appointed because Keynes had reached such ascendancy with his theory of general employment, and that there was no one to really match him. So it was the London School of Economics took him on to kind of act as a counterpoint to Keynes. And unfortunately, because Hayek spoke very poor English, it was very guttural, and he had a hard time being able to communicate complex concepts. He wasn't really able to take on Keynes to the same, and match Keynes basically. And so, unfortunately, there's been this very skewed world economic view, which is based on Keynesian economics and neo-Keynesian economics, and it doesn't serve the world well, unfortunately. So that's enough on Hayek. It's his work is certainly fascinating, and he's talked about so many different areas of political economy. Political economy was the term given several hundred years ago to the whole phenomenon of politics and economics. Unfortunately, it's been split into two different theoretical sectors and silos, and unfortunately, because of they don't blend as well as they did, they don't get dealt with together. It's created more problems than it's actually been able to solve.
And look at this, like, wow, this is in 1974. Like, you wouldn't see an economist entitling the lecture "The Pretense of Knowledge." Current day economists, because most economists nowadays seem to be very sure. They use math and all that kind of stuff to have an illusion that it's science. And he really points this out, that he call it scientistic. It's not really science, you know?
Yep.
They try to apply physics to human behavior, which is really not, or at least right now, we don't have yet a way to quantitatively determine behavior. It's more qualitative, as he says here. Yeah. And have you seen the Haynes and Hayek rap video?
I have. It's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah. We could
put a link on your
site
as well.
Yeah, we'll do that. And where can I find your work, Peter?
Well, I have a website called emergingevents.com. Unfortunately, it's a little bit out of date. It's I just have a... Yep. I try to put up postings from time to time, and just to keep people tracking along. A lot of my work is based around an article you can see on the right-hand side of the website called "The End of the Long Game: 2009 to 2018," where I explain what's going on and where it's all heading. So awesome. That'll give you a lot of context, and then the blog updates will just keep you timed as to where it's all happening. So
what's the title? Can you say more about the title? What's the long game, and why is it ending?
The long game, because this is a game that's been going on since 1783, and this is the Industrial Revolution business cycle that's been underway. That's just coming to an end. Every cycle has an up phase and a down phase, and so we're probably as late as March 2018, we're going into the down phase of this this cycle, and that downward phase will probably last anywhere up to 70 years, 30 to 70 years. and then there'll be a new business cycle that will emerge out of that. But by then, by that time, I'll long be dead, of course, and at the same time, the world will have changed just so dramatically, so fundamentally. I can't even begin to think how it'll look. So
it's a bit like the
just extraordinary. Sorry?
It's a bit like the singularity.
Absolutely, yeah. Except singularity has a positive worldview outcome. I think the level of suffering that has to happen between now and then is going to be massive.
Yeah, I know. That happened when we moved from agriculture to industrialization, right? We had
exactly right. Yeah.
We had 2 world wars. We had like all the stories of Dickens in London, you know, or the child labor. We had slavery, all of these things as we transition to a new.
Exactly.
Do you think that's inevitable?
It is.
Is there a way to soften it?
It's embedded in human nature. These cycles are embedded in human nature, and so it is inevitable. There's not a lot we can do about it. There's a lot we can do to mitigate the surface circumstances, the level of violence and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's these things kind of like have a probabilistic nature and a very high probability that they'll actually form. For example, at the end of this downward phase of the cycle, you can expect another major war. People are already talking about World War III. It's definitely not going to happen now, in my viewpoint. But sometime after 2050, game on. And it's all the usual suspects, of course. China versus the United States. Other possibilities as well too. So Russia being involved somewhere. Russia's a small player though, and doesn't really have the population to really sustain a massive war. But they're still up there in the list of usual suspects. North Korea, perhaps, the same old suspects.
Yeah. So.
That's the depressing side. I should also put forward the positive side of things, the advances in technology that are continuing to happen. This is a constant, actually. The fact that technology is constantly changing. There is a minor fluctuation in the level of output of new technology, but the essence is that technology will keep on progressing, and so cures for cancer, new ways of creating housing solutions, new ways of doing things, just extraordinary, and that is so exciting. You know, sort of some of the issues that we face in the world, pollution, for example, health issues, will just no longer be around in 50 years' time, and that is very exciting. So
that's what people sometimes miss, is that. Yeah, you're right. There's this cycle where when people industrialize, they pollute a lot, but then as incomes rise, then they mitigate pollution. Like LA now is much better than in the 70s because they've been spending on getting rid of pollution and all that. But really, people don't really report that because it's not clickable, you know, when say, oh, the air is better in LA. It's much better to just focus on the bad things.
Exactly. A lot of issues that humanity has to face now will not be an issue in 50 years' time. And a lot of myths that humans hold now will have gone for the time being. So, and that's a great thing, because to have unreality stripped away is a very positive thing. Unfortunately, it can also be a very painful thing. And one typical example of that is that the U.S. economy has a sustainable situation. This is not true at all. It's you see the level of indebtedness of public facilities, public debt, and unfunded liabilities and things like that. And this is just crazy. The level of the eternal war situation that they generated from their political viewpoint. It's being the global hegemon that they are, comes at a very high cost. And just as Russia collapsed, the very real risk of this also happening in the United States is very, very high now. So,
it's happened before, like in the Roman Empire. Once you can't feed your army, that's when the empire collapses. When you don't have enough money to pay your army, your soldiers, that's when
Exactly.
it's really bad, you know.
Yep, exactly right. And history always repeats itself. So
Yeah,
just as we've seen the Roman Empire, and many empires come and go, so the Pax Americana will
yeah,
also go by the wayside. So
yeah. I'm just reading this book. It's an
ah,
amazing
yeah,
book which tells the
yeah,
story from the really the center of the world, which is that area between Europe and Asia. And it's amazing. There's so many. I haven't finished it, but even the bits I've read, it's amazing how like Baghdad was once the most opulent city on earth, and all those things. Like, I
well,
didn't
that's
really learn in school because we learned about the Greeks, the Romans. We didn't really learn about the Persians,
yeah.
the Ottoman Empire, and then all this, the caliphate.
Yeah, liberal democratic tradition really has its roots in Greece and yeah, and Rome. So kind of explains our view is biased towards that sort of
Yeah,
chapter of history, but it's just such a small piece of the overall picture. And when you can weigh this up and sort of see the huge scale of things, huge scale of humanity, then it kind of takes on a different context, doesn't it? So,
yeah,
very
yeah.
exciting. Yeah.
And I think it's richer
Yeah.
too. The more you expand the history, and then also reading it, yeah, because history really depends on who wrote it. And I think the beauty of the internet now is, and the beauty of the information-rich world we live in, is you can actually, if you take the time, you could contrast. You could read maybe 10 points of view written by different authors on the same event and see what they say. And it's
Exactly.
an
Yeah.
amazing thing to see the rich tapestry of ideas and ways of looking at things.
Yep. Totally agreed. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. It's yep. So
It feels like this is a good time to end this episode. Thank you,
well,
Peter,
this is
for jumping in. Any last messages to our viewers?
no. Just thank you. I've really enjoyed our conversation. So wishing you all the best with this little project of yours. It's I hope it grows and grows.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Maybe you can come in next again in the future because I'm sure there's really more we can talk about.
sure. Happy to. Yeah. Always happy to. Yeah.
So thank you,
Okay.
people watching. I apologize if we went over time, but it just felt right to just keep on discussing these things. But we can't go on forever, so end it here now. And please share if you enjoy this. Please share, comment, and if you found this video by accident through the internet, please subscribe via the YouTube channel. If you subscribe, then you'll be informed when the next episode comes out. Thank you very much, viewers, and I'll see you in the next episode.